Hello, welcome back to another episode of Chatting with Asta. Here I try to shine a light on cool people that I know in my life as from all sorts of backgrounds. And today I'm delighted to be joined by a fierce character actor named Nelson Leis. Um, you may recognize his work from The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Supernatural, Prey, and most recently, the 8.1 million viewed episode of The Last of Us. I'm excited to have him on the show today. Welcome to the show, Nelson.
Hello, Asta. Nice to see you. Thank you for that gorgeous introduction. Oh my goodness, it surprised me. I impressed myself almost.
Oh, I mean, you're this incredible person that I just happened to know through another incredible person and named Vanessa, who was also on the show. And it's just
Hmm.
so cool how over the years you are just subconsciously in every cool and demented role that could possibly be had.
Yes,
But let's
yes.
let's start with what's fresh in everyone's minds. This past weekend, you were on The Last of Us, which was, like I said, the 8.1 most viewed, you know,
Yeah,
episode.
8.1 million. Wow. Yeah.
Million. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a little indie with a tiny
yeah,
little budget, but they really made it work. Bubble gum and chopsticks and just tied it together.
yeah. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
no, I mean, wow, it's so impressive. Just the scale of the thing. I mean, it's like every actor's dream when you go on a sets like this. You feel like a little kid. You
Yeah,
feel like you're playing make believe. You're in the sandbox on like, a real neighborhood in this area of Alberta, suburb of Calgary called Okotoks, which is I'm not sure what the derivation of that, probably First Nations. And they rented out or took over this entire neighborhood, like a whole cul-de-sac. So it was like that was our playground.
yeah,
It was so cool. It was crazy.
yeah. And it's like watching that. I'm one of the many viewers, which I feel like it's kind of shocking because a lot of things that are adapted, there's a lot of hardcore fans that are excited to see something adapted from a book or a series of comics or whatever. And this is a video game. And there are a lot of viewers for this show in particular, like myself, who never played the game, who are kind of just going in
Mhm.
blind and allowing ourselves to sort of just experience it for the first time. What was it like for you working on an episode that was clearly an emotional roller coaster, like for the viewer, but also you have to, I don't want to give any spoilers, but you have to do some very visceral work on this. How did you
Um, I mean, I didn't know where this episode landed in the context of the emotional arc and the overall arc of the story because they don't it's not like it's highly guarded and highly secretive, all these scripts and storyline, so it's not like I got those scripts, and I didn't even get the script right away. I got the sides for the audition, and it was only when I got there and I inquired through the AD department that he's like, well, we don't usually, we don't release the scripts to everybody,
yeah,
but think, your role what's going on with your character deems that you should get a script. And I read it and then I'm like, oh wow, that's what's going on. I didn't even realize, we'll hint at what I was doing here in
I think
code, but
we
what
can
I
just
was
say
doing.
spoiler alert. So if
Yeah.
you listened beyond this point, sorry, but we need to talk about it. So
Yeah.
go on, feel free.
I didn't know what the venison was, that it was people until I read that script.
Yeah,
And then so there was that aspect, of
yeah,
course, which blew my mind, and shone a light on just the dire circumstances that these people were in, that they
yeah,
would get to this point. It's not like, we were all walking around 20 years ago doing this. I mean, this is, or even like 8 months ago.
yeah,
This is just like now, because we came here in the spring and it was beautiful, and it was idyllic and it pastoral, and it was like, oh wow, look at this beautiful community on this lake, this abandoned resort.
mhm,
And then of course it's butted up against the Rockies, and when that winter comes and that storm hits those mountains and the snow comes down, man, it is cold, the wildlife disappears, all the food, the game disappears. So these people only resorted to this like in the last several months,
Yeah.
right? So I learned that. And then I read the rest of the script, and oh my gosh, Bella's journey was just obviously riveting and heartbreaking and visceral. And I was like, then I knew, I'm like, oh damn, this is like, wow, what an ending to this script. What an ending to this episode. I think this is gonna like knock people's socks off.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because even your moments on screen, they're so loaded. Cause like even just you saying venison, I was like, it can't be. Like I was like, I was looking at my husband, I'm like, they haven't even dragged the deer in. Like we haven't even seen it. Like there's no way. Um, like even and I was like, it's Nelson. There's no like I wouldn't cast you to just be serving deer. Like I so I knew, but then like later you get to be head to head with the lead of the show, Pedro. And I mean that's we you know when we think about like uh intimacy coordination, we usually think about like the sexy stuff, but like what was it doing being because you're very intimate with him and it's a very like it's not like a you're on a level playing field, like it's very like he like squeezes the life out of you. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, he squeezes the life out of me, and he's holding on to me because
yeah,
he's almost, or he was near death himself, and so but not obviously not fully recuperated by any stretch. So he's hanging on my back, and he's putting his weight on my back
yeah,
and doing what he needs to do as an actor, and to make the scene real. And yeah, it was incredible. And I've actually I've done a couple interviews before this, and I haven't mentioned this to anybody before because I just remembered it yesterday, and I think it's okay for me to say it. But
yeah,
I was recovering from an injury when I booked this role, and of course it was in my back, it was in my spine, it was a couple fractured compression fractures in my vertebrae, one from falling off a horse and one from somebody jumping on me in another show. Longer story. That's it. But so, and I'm like, I booked this role, and then I'm like, of course I did. Of course I booked this role. Like, and I'm laughing. I'm like, and it says, we have this fight to the death, and I'm like, just ironic. That's such a
yeah,
Nelson move to
yeah,
book this role, and so I confided in Pedro, and I said, "Look, I've been doing rehab, and I'm ready, and I'm strong, and I feel good. But this happened to me." And I tell the stunt coordinator. I don't tell the director though, because I don't want to like freak him
yeah,
out. But I tell Pedro, and I tell the coordinator, so we're all on the same page. And he's like, "Okay, you like?" I'm like, "No, we can go for it. Like, let's do our thing."
yeah,
And there's a moment when we do a few takes, and the director comes over, Ali Abbasi,
yeah,
uh, fantastic director who wants to do a number of takes, not just two, many, many of these. And he gives me a note, and I immediately go, "Yep, great, okay, can do." And then Pedro just kind of is like looks like gives me the eyeball, like, dude, like when Ali walks away, he's like, dude, come on. And I'm like, he's like, and he says to me, he's like, oh, actors, we're just so quick to say yes and jump through that hoop for the director. Director's like, hey, can you do this, this, and that? Yep, 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 I'm good.
yeah,
And then Pedro says that to me. I'm like, no, yeah. And of course he's so sweet, he's so awesome because he's
yeah,
like taking care of his scene partner and the person who's coming on to guest on this show. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, you're right. I'm laughing at myself for being such a puppy dog, and a little,
yeah,
whatever the director says, which of course is our job. And I'm like, no, man, thank you. I'm good, I'm good. So we do our thing, and we do it a number of times. And yeah, man, like we're just rolling around, and it's real intimate.
yeah.
Real
And
intimate.
it's funny you say that because I feel like as an actor, yeah, you really don't want your weaknesses known by the director because you don't know how they'll surgically affect you. But in that case, like it ends up being that everyone else ends up having to soft direct you because they know it's probably they want to be careful with you.
Yeah.
I know that feeling. And you know what's funny is like I've been in that physical situation myself, and it's ended up being that that take where you're like wincing in pain is the one they use, like the one where you're like, oof,
Yeah.
that was the one that I shouldn't
Yeah.
have done. And they
Yeah.
used it, and they got some realness on screen.
Yeah, you hope they do. You really hope they do, because I've
Yeah,
also had the thing where like you hurt yourself and then you go, oh man, they're not going to use this take. Like when I did
yeah,
this episode of Arrow many years ago, season 1 of Arrow, and I'm like kind of wading through this stream of water is like shooting at me from a fire hose, and I'm dying at the same time of this drug overdose from some fanciful drug on Arrow, and I'm sort of convulsing while crawling across the floor, and I like smash my head on the concrete, and like while the camera's rolling, and I'm kind of like, oh, whoa, this is all going through my head, like, whoa,
yeah,
that's okay, that was a real hit, that wasn't good, but I'm not, I didn't knock myself out, and I'm crawling, they're like caught. And I'm like, oh, I bet you they don't use that. The one where you almost knock yourself unconscious, like, they need to go again because of some angle or something or something.
yeah,
But I am not, I'm not a proponent of like, you gotta like bleed for your craft, because I think that's dangerous. And I think it's
yeah,
specifically for like me to say that to other actors, young actors, because so many accidents can happen, and I've played a lot of physical roles, and I've got a lot of scuffs and
yeah,
almost broken things and some broken things, and so I would never say that to an actor, but just the circumstances that I'm in and the person I am, I'm like, I have to go for it. I don't know how to not go for it.
yeah,
And so things get hurt, but the older you get, I'm very cognizant now
yeah,
of like my environment, how slippery the floor is, what's around me, what kind of shoes I'm wearing. Because you rehearse this in a safe space, like in a gymnasium or rehearsal hall, or with the coordinator in the back room. And then you get on set, and then there's like these floorboards with spaces between them or whatever. So, I'm in my late 40s now, so I'm not like a 20-year-old who's like, yeah, just smash me with a baseball bat and do. But yet I still play these roles, right? I
yeah.
get cast roles.
Yeah, you sort of
Um,
have to take care of yourself despite playing characters that don't. So you sort of
yeah,
like, be in a situation where sort of like on an indie set versus you've worked on like, bigger productions where there are roles that are the airbags for you, like a stunt coordinator, an on-set medic and all of that. But sometimes you'll work on a passion project and you're glad you have the skill set to sort of be the little angel and devil on your shoulder and be like, should I wear knee pads? Is this the shot? Like, will you see this?
yeah.
Because otherwise you can't do more takes, you know?
I always say at this age, I say yes to the knee pads
Yeah.
right off the bat.
Oh yeah.
Boom. You want some knee pads? Yes,
Yes.
sir. Thank you.
Is
Yes,
there a
ma'am.
crash mat? Is there a crash mat
Yeah,
off camera?
totally.
Boom.
And
Yes.
it was fun for Pedro and I, because we're around the same age. I think he
Yeah.
is like a year younger than me or something like that. And so when I disclosed what was going on with my body, we sort of had like this commiserating over how the body feels at that age, and film injuries and from repetitive movements, and
Yes.
he and it didn't look like he would, but he had to like, he was hitting
Yeah.
my back with his hand in this kind of collarbone area, so it was, I mean, it was hard for him to stab me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But also the repetitive movement. I played
Yeah,
Abigail
boom.
in the Crucible, and in rehearsals I kept throwing myself on the ground dramatically on the same part. And then one day, pop, a hematoma, just like a huge golf ball
Dude.
welt. And it's just from this gentle
Yeah,
repetitiveness. And actors have to repeat actions. And it's even worse when you get the beginning of something that a director likes, and then they like have to keep adjusting around you because they're like, "Ooh, but the light wasn't good," or "Ooh, but like."
yeah,
So
yeah.
I commend you because like you also worked on Prey, and that was like a huge action epic, and you're like
Yeah,
this, twirly mustachy guy, and
yeah, waxed
like,
mustache.
yeah, what was it like working on something that's very much action is the main focus, like,
Well, amazingly, that is given what it is, that's one of the few projects where I haven't like banged myself up. There were like I don't think there were even any scuffs on me in Prey. Like we're shooting some muskets, running through the forest, getting blown up, but like no injuries. I think the closest we came, there's that shot when we're at the camp,
Yeah.
um, when Naru is in the cage when
Yeah.
we captured her, and it's quite an establishing kind of wide shot. And I'm in the background. I didn't know what the lens was on the camera, but so you're playing the scene, well, obviously full out, and there's a dog that goes by me,
Yeah.
and I'm yelling in French, shut that dog up,
Yeah.
and as it goes by me, it's kind of a film dog, but not really. It's essentially
Yeah.
a stray they found.
Yeah.
And I yell at the dog, and it just like rears up on me. So that was my closest moment to danger.
Yeah.
And I kept doing it. I thought, well, this is my job is in this scene. I like, hopefully, if this dog attacks me, like somebody just grabs it.
Yeah.
And again, that was one of those moments where you go, like the dog just like at one point was just like on me,
Yeah.
and I'm like, that was so badass. I bet they don't use that take.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was my closest moment to danger on Prey, was almost getting bitten by a half wild dog.
Yeah. And something
Yeah.
I wondered about that, which I guess it could obviously apply to a lot of the roles you've played, is do you distance yourself at all from like the people that you're the heavy against? Like if you're playing a villain opposite someone, do you try to like kind of give yourself space from them? Or I'm not saying method, but do you like
No,
not want
no,
to be chummy with them because it's harder to I
it
don't
really depends on the role,
know.
and I find that opposite women, and I've been cast in that way
Yeah.
opposite a lot of women,
Yeah.
that I don't do that opposite women, because I want to, not that obviously they need protecting or reassuring, but I just, I'm like, I can go there when I need to. And so I don't need to be this intense dude on set.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a weird balance, because sometimes there was a like a sexually aggressive aspect to it. So I just, want them to be reassured that like they're not dealing with that guy, right? I'll
Yeah.
do it when it's rolling, but
This
I'm
is
not that
pretend.
guy. It's a
Yeah.
weird balance, because of course you don't, our job is not to apologize as actors. It's to go 100% in the moment.
Yeah.
You and we throw down. Um, and everybody knows that those are the rules of the game, but at the same time, you want to let your scenes partners know, like, hey, um, you know, we're playing in the sandbox. We're gonna go full out when we roll,
Yeah.
I'm here for you. I'm not a freaking weirdo.
Yeah. No, and
I mean,
that's very much appreciated. Like I think that there have been some times on sets where it does depend on the role. Especially if you are being physically aggressive, like some people want just that assurance that you're not like kind of vicariously like being that, like that you
yeah,
have those urges. It also lets the actress know that you are, like you said, a safe space and someone who this is pretend. Like this is pretend.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't want you to like have a traumatic response because you don't. I'm an unknown, but if you make them a known, it's sort of. But it's something interesting because you've played a lot of these roles. Like I just watched today because I hadn't seen it before, and I was like, I didn't know you worked with Joe Dante. Uh, watched the Screwfly. Is that what it's called? The
the
Screwfly.
Screwfly solution.
Yeah, which was one of the Masters of Horror series, and
Mm.
you play basically an inciting incident. You play like kind of like a
Mhm.
patient zero, and you have this
Patient zero.
incredible, like, just visceral, like, I'm so turned on, I'm violent kind of moment.
Yeah, yeah,
It's wild, and then you like just keep going. And I'm like, I cannot even understand, like, because you really, that seemed like one of those, you throw yourself really in it. Like, I don't even know. Like, was she dead? Because to me, I believed it. Like, there's no way.
That was dark and intense, and you wonder if that type of thing would be made in this day and age. I guess it would, because there's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of commentary there.
Oh yeah.
But it was intense. Maybe some of the methodology would be different. For instance, in the world that we're in with firearms on set now, I don't know how often they use squibs anymore, but I was like fully squibbed up with that charge on my chest and a blood pack, and there's a
Yeah.
little line running down my leg to the person who presses the button. And you have to be careful with those because it's a charge and
Yeah.
people have been injured by those.
Yeah.
And then yeah, it was intense. And both of those women, there was the original woman, then another one I go after very quickly.
Yeah.
They're both stunt women.
Seemed like
So
they really had to take a lot of energy from you. And like, what do you do for a role like that really does center on a physical brutality? Like, what is your process right before? Like, because you basically, watching it, I was like, this Nelson's a human powder keg. Like, this is insane. Like, oh
yeah. Yeah, I think, as you pointed out, I've played so many roles like this. You get cast this way, and then, obviously I'm auditioning like 99% of actors, and we all get put in a category by casting generally, which honestly is a good thing, because then you start to audition, then you actually start to book roles, and you actually like, oh wow, I'm acting and like kind of like making a living now. This is amazing, after
yeah,
a long time, when they figured out, oh, we know who this guy is, and then they see you do it, and then maybe they see you're real, and then they start bringing you in for that, and they're like, oh, he can do this, he can come off believably in this world and these types of characters. And that was like, I think you're talking about 2006 or 7. I'm
yeah,
still auditioning for those roles to this day,
yeah,
right? Variations on that. And so I think, in terms of, you're asking how I prepare for that, um, it's so in my DNA and my blood and my memory, my emotional memory, like, just to be able to go from 0 to 100. I think a thing that informed uh my life, my creativity, and my physicality from a very early age was martial arts.
mhm,
Uh, so I started doing karate at 13 years old, and I did that pretty much full time up until I left for university and then theater school. I got my black belt, and you get your 10,000 hours in high school, because you're not working. Well, some people work a job, but you're not like having to bring home the bacon, really.
yeah,
And so being a physical person was in my blood from that age, and I could bring that to all my roles. I'm not
yeah,
afraid of being in my body. Such a balance. I think sometimes some actors are maybe afraid of coming off too big. That's a
yeah,
real worry. You hear that lots of actors say that, even when given a note, like, "Hey, you can really go for this, and you can expand on this. You can bring more energy or physicality." People are like, it's like being too big is the worst thing in the world. Like, oh my god, I want to come off too big. They're gonna think I'm
yeah.
too big. I'm gonna look like a clown. Whereas I was never afraid of that. So
Yeah. Well, because you're connected. Like, if you are in touch with your body and your mind, and you do integrate, like, it comes off
yeah,
as authentic. And in life, shit gets dramatic. I mean, I've seen people
yeah,
get into fist fights over spilled coffee on the subway, like ridiculous
absolutely.
stuff. That if it was a scene, somebody would say that's not plausible, but
Yeah,
is. And I mean, it's just like, I just commend you, because when I see those scenes, I'm like, I'm watching it in three ways, right? As an audience member, as an actor, and as a director and filmmaker. And that scene itself, it starts here, and then you have a separate shot that goes here. So you have to relive different angles of this, and like have different setups and different experiences depending on
yeah,
what the needs are. And that's just what we see. We don't see what didn't work, or your moment before as an actor. Like, if you
mm,
ate some weird Cheetos, like, I don't know, there are things that can
yeah.
factor in. But
I'm a big believer that the physical affects the emotional. Maybe
yes,
some people would call that working from the outside in. But there's, I mean, not just in acting and everything. There's lots of science and studies, anecdotal stuff on, throwing punches in the air, for instance, or like, those studies where you put your hands on your hips in the superhero pose and what that does to your body chemistry after like 5 minutes of doing that, right? And
yeah,
the endorphins and feeling better. I'm saying this anecdotally. Um, so absolutely, so I just know because I've worked with my body through martial arts for so long that it if you commit to something physically, it will do something to you chemically. And
yes,
that's, the thought, the emotion, and breath. I think breath is our biggest ally as actors. I mean, sometimes all I have to do is just take a breath and boom, you're
yeah,
right there. Well,
yeah,
and I'm talking the thought and the breath, that
yeah,
that thought about your family member, your daughter, your friend, or the dark thing in that scene. The
yeah.
breath, look at them, have the thought, boom.
Yes, and you, speaking of outside in, like, you know, from the screw-fi solution, you're playing like a very buttoned up guy, and like you're playing the opposite of what that's presenting. And then on the other side, your work on Sabrina, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, your outside like enhances something, and you're doing like this incredible mask and body work because you're like free of the pretend veneer of civility. Like how fun is, how does that affect you as far as, um do you feel freer in prosthetics, or does it hinder your performance, or do you have to
Um,
work through it?
that was really only the second time I had done a short film in prosthetics,
Mhm.
and then some makeup test on some news show like 15 years ago. Here's what you can do with prosthetics, and we've got this,
Gotcha.
and then I booked that role, and it was the first time, but I felt confident I could do it. And that voice that you hear on Sabrina was not there in the audition.
Mhm.
But I took a big risk, and I thought, and I just like came up with this voice, and I thought I'm going to do it and see what they say. I'm going to take the big swing. I mean, this is our job, but we also get nervous sometimes when we're like
Yeah,
taking the big vocal, physical, emotional risks.
yeah,
And 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 then also I started working in the mirror, like with my face, and I hadn't tried the prosthetics on yet, and a voice, and trying to put it all together,
yeah,
recording it. And then I got to set, and the day that I put it on was the day that I was working, and so I immediately ran to my trailer and started working with it, and I did get a great compliment from the prosthetics lead applicator, Mike Fields, who's huge in the industry, at least in Canada, and he's like, a lot of people actually can't, they get subsumed by this,
yeah,
like they melt inwards because they get overwhelmed by the prosthetics and they can't work through it. And he's like, uh, you work through it, you work with it, and you work through it. You don't let
yeah,
it drown you.
yeah,
And I guess that speaks to my ability to, just, I don't want to use the word go big,
yeah,
those words, but like just really like trust my breath and my body and my voice,
yes,
and let her rip. And so it was so much fun. And they didn't say no, they didn't say stop. They just let me keep going. And I made it through. They kept killing off the demons, and I was the last demon standing. And probably because demons are expensive, because you got to have 2.5 hours of a
yeah,
prosthetics team working on you.
yeah,
So if somebody's got to be cut, let's cut a demon. That means we're cutting like five pools of labor,
yeah,
and they went around me, and I
yeah,
made it 3 seasons, and I
mhm,
really loved what they did and how they let it evolve, because such a wonderful surprise how Beelzebub evolved over those 3 seasons, going from a more sort of singularly uh, ill-intentioned character into
yeah,
somebody who, in that the end of that third season, was on Sabrina's team
yeah,
Sabrina.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if when it came back for a fourth season, which is, was everybody's intention, that Beelzebub would have been doing some dance routine. I mean, it was really, I was breaking bread, well, technically breaking squid with Sabrina
Yeah.
and Lucifer and Madame Satan. So we were heading in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, isn't that's kind of the job of the actor, right? To sort of like find ways to redeem all characters. Like if
Mm.
you're doing a great job, you can definitely have supporting and auxiliary characters just function as sounding boards for tales of morality, but the best shows and the best stories give everyone a perspective and a voice, and so you begin to understand more, because that's what
Mm.
storytelling is. You want to understand. And
Totally.
yeah, and you've gotten to work a lot on this kind of character building, and it has a lot to do with your theater background, because you've worked on a lot of drama, and that's kind of where you got started. But something I found interesting and I learned about you was that it's not enough for you to just do this character work or to do this like deep diving, but you also gave back by doing this TCO squared program. And I thought that would be such a cool thing for you to share with people, because like a lot of the things that artists think about is transferring the sort of superficiality of being an artist to something that's functional or gives back. So do you want to
Mhm.
tell people about TCO squared?
Yeah, TCO squared, which is a very 90s name, and
Yeah.
this was in the mid 90s, sort of starting in late 95, I believe.
Mhm.
Was a program that toured to high schools in British Columbia and some elementary schools, but
Yeah.
grade seven, couldn't go too young based on the topic. And it was spearheaded by the Attorney General's Office of British Columbia and the Children of the Street Society, and it was we were tasked with developing a show, an interactive show that talked about childhood prostitution and essentially the warning signs of groomers.
Yeah.
This was before the term human trafficking really was existed or used en masse,
Yeah.
and but that's essentially
What it
what
was.
it is and what it was. And this is right after I went to school in New York. Um, to the American Academy. And so I got back, and you had to. I saw this ad for this touring show, and they asked that you write a monologue, a personal monologue, and which I did. And I wrote it from the point of view of a person who was sitting. I'd seen somebody, a young person, like leaning against the wall, sitting down in an alley, and I couldn't get them out of my mind. So I wrote this monologue from their perspective, how they got there, and I booked the job, and it ended up being this job where we wrote a show, we wrote a play, an interactive play, for many months before we even started touring, with under the auspices of those two organizations, and with the goal of pointing out, looking for the signs that groomers were using, and they were targeting a lot of high school kids at the
Yeah.
time. And so a serious subject and an important subject, and it's still running to this day, 30 years later or whatever that is. And that's where my typecasting began. Of course, I played a young pimp, a young groomer, and of course, and never looked back.
Yeah.
And so we go, and it was very vulnerable. I wonder how this would be developed in this day and age, and how it would be developed in the United States is a whole other thing, because it's a very sensitive subject, and you're also role playing with high school kids. I mean, you're asking them, hey, we're going to do this thing, and this guy's going to come up to you, and he's going to start talking to you, and just act as yourself, and we'll see where it goes. And that was my job to,
Yeah.
it was generally young women, not young men, but now it would, I'm sure, involve young men,
Yeah.
and go up to them and just start working on them as I had learned, I mean, this was an incredible opportunity for a young person,
Yeah.
not even an acting opportunity. My God, we worked with the Vice Squad in Vancouver. We did ride-alongs with the Vice Squad. You can't do that as much in this day and age anymore. I mean, oh my God, I don't even know how we did this. Like, yeah, you couldn't do that in this day and age. We went into some guy's house, some guy's penthouse, who was suspected of being a pimp to young women,
Oh my God.
and there was nobody there at the time, but it was intense, man. And I actually I remember this moment. The guy was denying everything. No, no, no. There's nobody else living here. And why? And there's clothing everywhere, and there's paraphernalia and just weird stuff. Like for one guy, and I saw on the ground this big pile of clothing, um, laundry that belonged to, like, obviously a young woman, a teenage girl, and I pointed it out to the cops because the guy was denying. I don't know how the cops missed this, but I was like, "Oh, look, there's clothing there that's like not his," and and they saw it and they started questioning him. It was not my job. We were meant to stay silent, but I saw it and I just
Oh,
pointed it out. So, getting into the weeds a little bit, but it was like an incredible experience
yeah.
for so many different reasons. And I did that, I think, for a year. After the show started, or when the show was touring, we would do this 5 days a week, hitting different high schools every day. I think the show was maybe 45 minutes to an hour. So we might be able to hit 2 to 3 high schools in a day, four, maybe in a big day. And we flew up elsewhere in the province, to the middle of the province, northern BC. It was like, that was the first time that I learned that storytelling, art, um, and the interaction with the audience could have an impact.
Yeah.
And so I learned that from a young age. That was, what was I, 23 or something?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's brilliant because you said like that was kind of the beginning of you sort of being in this stereotypical typecast
Yeah.
roles. I see it as a strength because I feel like as an actor, you have to really give way to the way you're perceived. And a lot of actors bring their ego into it because they're obsessed with showing their range. They're like, no,
Sure.
I know how to do all of this. But
Yeah.
one of the best things I think an actor can do is sort of give way to how they can best serve a story and best make that story three-dimensional and make it something that people can tangibly like feel like impacted by. And so you got to like frame the idea of it and how functional it was and how important it was. So that,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like when I watch everything in your career that I've seen, you know, you bring this authenticity from one, having seen some of these predators, but two, understanding why it is important to keep playing these roles, even if they're not perfect. Because I feel like right now we're sort of wanting everything to be clean cut because we want to
Yeah.
idealize society, but you're getting in the nitty gritty of it,
Yeah.
and it's exciting to see some of you have this upcoming production that kind of delves into more of that period piece territory, but sometimes doing period pieces feels very relevant because you're just using it as a disguise. Can you tell us a little bit about Shogun?
Oh yeah, Shogun. Yeah, that is based on the famous James Clavell novel that was written in the mid '70s. This
Mhm.
huge book.
Yeah.
They did a mini series on it in the early '80s,
Mhm.
and it takes place in feudal Japan in the year 1600. And I'm not giving anything away because
Yeah.
this is, it's you can see it if you've read the book, and if you just glean the Wikipedia entry.
Yeah.
This, and it's also based on actual events in real life. These merchant ships and these exploring ships from uh, they were Portuguese, but uh, they were actually, sorry, there was a British captain, but they were Dutch vessels, and I am a Dutch sailor, and they get lost somewhere around the tip of South America, and they drift and they wash up on the shores of Japan, and this happened in real life. And the Armada broke up. Many of these ships got lost at sea, and this ship washed up on the shore, and I play Henrik, one of the survivors. Again, I'm a very specific color in the beginning of this journey that then takes place in Japan, and it's it's predominantly a Japanese cast. Um, Hiroyuki Sonata, who's a huge Japanese star, is in it, and there's John Blackthorne is the British captain, and it's his journey there, going into this society that was mostly Portuguese at the time. So it was sort of this Protestants and Catholics battle, and it's I mean, it was another epic world, just like The Last of Us. Like huge budget, huge production value. I mean, I was in a ship that they built. It was incredible. Like this, again, I felt like a kid in a sandbox. I was like, I couldn't believe it when I walked in this ship, and the hammocks that
Yeah.
were lying there, of course, drenched with water, classic Nelson roll, just like
Yeah.
water dripping on me, cold and miserable, and just like for hours. I'm like, yeah, this is my world right here, just
Yeah.
being dripped with water. But I mean, it worked because these guys, they had scurvy, they're dying, they're literally dying as they wash up on shore. So it was perfect that I was being drenched with water for hours and just having to sit in this hammock and be cold and miserable. I didn't have to act for that. It's going to be a huge production. It's on FX. I'm not sure when it launches. I can say all that,
Yeah.
and yeah, you could look it up uh, online. Shogun. It was a hugely popular novel. Yeah.
I'm excited about it. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because you also sort of have gone from more modern roles into increasingly period or like genre, like very sort of from realistic to like bigger scale.
Mhm.
Um, but and I want to give a brief shout out to your the lovely Vanessa Walsh, who you
Yes.
have First Glance Productions with, and I'm sure she makes sure that after you come home from these freezing scurvy like conditions that you have like a nice bubble bath and self-care day, right? Like you probably have to feel
Yeah.
well
Yeah.
fed,
Back.
nourished.
Yeah. Back before Stella, before we had the responsibility of our
Oh,
beautiful
human.
daughter.
Yes.
Uh, and now it's sort of like right back from set and back to like, okay, where's Stella at? Is she sleeping? What does she
Yes.
need? And relieving it. Doesn't really matter how long my day on set is. If Vanessa was home with Stella, it's all about like relieving Vanessa and like, okay, Dad's home. Let me help you out now. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh
there's
well.
no like sitting on the sofa for like 2 hours. Which is as it should be, of course.
Yes. But
Like that's
that's
harder than acting. That's harder than sitting in water for 4 hours having a
yeah.
baby.
And you're also like putting the hard work in like your way of contributing to a world that Stella will grow up in and like showing that respect to your partner and to women in general. And I think that's really awesome. And as you know, from one acting couple to another, I just think it's like so beautiful. And so,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you so much.
But I wanted to wrap up by asking you, thinking of everything we talked about, um, what would you say is like a message or like a feeling from your entire your career or existence, however meta you want to
Mhm.
get, that
Yeah.
you wish to put out into the universe, or like what is your guiding principle in this world?
Wow. That's I mean, I in terms of the work
Hmm.
and the blessing of the work, I take it I don't know if I take it seriously. If there is some God or entity or universe to speak to, I take the responsibility seriously.
Mm.
And I guess that's sometimes why I do get injured. It's like I do what's needed for the role. Again, I'm not advocating injury
Yeah.
or self-harm, but I'm just saying like I take the opportunity because when I do work, every actor knows this, man. Like, you're really blessed to work, and when you're making a living, you're so blessed to be making a living. Like, so that's my thing. I say thank you. I take it seriously, and I respect the opportunity, and I don't take it for granted. Yeah,
That's beautiful.
yeah.
It's
So
I
when like it's that balance of like, we all envision things that we desire that we're working towards, sort of like have a light grip on the wheel. It's that balance, right? Like have a light grip, but also have a vision, right? Like, wow, I'd like to work on this type of project or with these types of people or this capacity or this scale, grandeur, whether it's my role, the production. Um, but also have let go. Okay, I've asked for this, I've envisioned this, and then I say, but I'm ready. I say I can handle it, and I say I will when it comes to me, I will do it in such a way where I gently take it and I say thank you, and I'm doing this for all the people that support me and do the same thing.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
yeah,
I just feel like I guess what I'm saying is I feel a sense of responsibility, and I don't take any of this casually. I kind of like am one of those people who believes how you do one thing in life is how you do everything. I don't know if it's come across at all, but I'm like I love to have fun and joke around. I'm a huge ridiculous goof, but I also am like I don't take things lightly. You
yes,
know,
yeah.
I'm specific about everything that I do in my life.
It's
Specific and
intentional.
dedicated.
It's
Intentional.
yes,
There's the smart word.
and that basically is just having a gratitude for whatever level you're at, and not needing something to validate why you're doing what you're doing. Like, because none of what you said so that I can be famous, so that I can win an Oscar, so that I can do. It's just like you're letting the work nourish you from the inside
Hmm.
out, and you're
Yeah.
just taking what's given. But then that you are able to attract those things. So I
Yeah.
really look forward to some sort of like anti-hero redemptive arc centered on you, because you're so good at supporting others. And I look forward to seeing what you do, obviously with Vanessa. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about your career and like your behind the scenes look at some really like intense work and very highly viewed work. 8.1 million viewers.
8.1 million people Sunday
Yes,
night.
yes. But I remember
Yeah.
when you said venison, I was like, it is not venison because
Yeah.
Nelson said it, because I did my homework.
Yeah.
So
That's I know you know the director Karen Lamb. That's a very Karen
yes,
Lamb thing to say. It's
yes,
not venison because Nelson said it. It's
yes.
something else.
It's definitely not
Nefarious.
venison.
Yeah.
Yes. So and yeah. So I'll leave you on that note. Everybody, please check out his work. There's so many things we didn't even talk about. Like, I remember I watch a lot of like lifetimey movies, and I remember seeing you on like Story of a Girl, and I was like, he gets to yell at Kevin Bacon, like what? So
Oh man. So
my
many good stories. That was
so many,
another life-changing job. Yeah.
yeah. So people, check out Nelson's filmography. Also revisit Masters of Horror. I mean, just looking at what's going on in the world right now, that episode is just like, I was like, that is happening right now.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
so see you guys on another episode, and thank you so much, Nelson, for joining me.
Asta, thank you so much for having me. This is a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I really did.
I'm glad.